Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. First, thanks for coming to my channel. I appreciate you visiting. I'd love it if you'd hit the like button on your way out before you leave today. All right, for today's project, I occasionally have a stone that's pattern is just really pretty or unique, and I want to kind of show that off without having a lot of distraction from it, and sometimes incorporate the design of the stone into the design that I actually make the piece. So this should have a little bit of both of that. It's pretty minimalist, but it's also got a little floral part of it because part of the stone pattern looks like flower stems to me. So we'll see if we can incorporate that into the design. Before we get started though, I would like to thank all of my subscribers. We just passed 3,100 subscribers, which is amazing. And I really appreciate all your support and your kind comments and good suggestions and all of that kind of thing. Thank you so much for that. I'd also like to thank my patrons over on Patreon. I really appreciate their support. If you're interested in finding out some of the cool things that are available over there, including like exclusive videos, live streams with me, the ability to vote on upcoming content, stuff like that, it's worth checking out. There's a link in the video description down below, along with some other links like buy me a coffee or visit my website or even visit my merch store, which has some cool stuff. So now they got that self-promotion out of the way, let's get started on the project. So this is that pretty stone I was talking about. It's a Sonoran Dendritic Rhyolite, which is a rock rather than a mineral actually. But it's got some cool patterns, and to me it just looks like the stems of a plant going up. And so on the outside of the bezel, on the structure of our piece here, I'm going to add a little flower head, I think, off the top of there. But we're going to do something kind of cool too. We're going to do an underneath the stone bail, which I don't know that I've ever done. I've seen them over the years many times, but I've never really done one. So I'm going to try one. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully it'll look cool and contemporary, but also have kind of a nature aspect to it. So for the back of the bezel, we're going to use 26 gauge sterling sheet. I'm going to create a little border on the outside, and that'll be 14 gauge square wire. I can probably use, I think we'll use 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip at 28 gauge or 26 gauge. Depends if I can. This is 28. If I can find some 26, I might use it. I kind of like the thicker stuff lately. But either way, either one would work. And then for the tubes that are going to go around the outside, I have some, I wrote down what size it was, my little idea of it. By the way, these are for sale on the merch store. They got a kind of a cool grid on them instead of just regular graph paper. I really like it because then the lines don't interfere with whatever you're sketching. So, all right. So it's going to go kind of like, the tube is going to be these pieces out here, like this. And so we're going to use this stuff. And this is 4.57 millimeter outer diameter on the tube, I think, and it's sterling. And so I'm going to cut a bunch of 6 millimeter length pieces here. And then that border will be out of this 14 gauge, like I said. I'm not sure what I'm going to make the flower out of, probably some 18 gauge sheet or something like that. But yeah, it's not going to take too many drastic, it's not going to take too many materials, I think, to make this one. So to start with, let's make the bezel for the stone, I think. So, okay, I did find some of the 26 gauge, which is slightly thicker, which I kind of like. I used to use really thin stuff, and then for some reason I started liking the thicker stuff. I'm not even sure why. Just feels a little more durable, I guess. Okay. I don't think this is going to be a super difficult project, but I think it'll be kind of a fun outcome. I think this stone is really painting-like, and it's one of those kind of stones you don't want to distract too much from it because it's so pretty and has such an interesting pattern. So you don't want to over decorate. You just want the stone to kind of be the thing that makes the piece stand out. Okay. I forgot to mention, as always, I'm using spray-on flux, which is called My-T-Flux. I get from Rio Grande, and the type of solder I use is hard silver sheet solder, and that's pretty much all I ever use. I have maybe 3 instances where I would use easy solder. You have a bigger bezel like this, sometimes if you put a dimple in the bottom when you're getting it ready to get the ends lined up, it'll make it a little bit springier, so it's easier to get them to stay pushing together. I've already got some solder on the pad here from yesterday, so I'll use a piece of that. I thought about doing an open back on this one, but it doesn't have a polished back. So. Got pretty good on the size there. I'm gonna, before we even cut the sheet, I'm gonna go ahead and make the border that I want to go around here. You can kind of estimate pi times diameter equals circumference, so if we go a little bit more than 3 times the diameter of it, save us cutting off, too big of a piece. So I'll just save enough so that I have a little bit extra to work with. Okay, and square wire, as always, tries to twist on you, so when we make this into a circle, I'm going to have to correct for the twist. So as you bend it, it tries to find the easiest way to bend, and that's usually diagonally. So. Alright, so let's file this end. I use these wide nose pliers a lot for making big bends when I need to kind of, you can let the tension of the wire kind of shape it a little bit. But you see it's trying to cup inwards there, it's doing this. So we need to stop and turn it outwards a little bit again. Normally if I'm making a border around something like this, I'm trying to get the size just perfect. But since we're going to, on that, this border that goes around here is going to stop where the flower is. So even if I don't get it perfectly matched up, so it looks nice, we're going to cut out some of that anyway. And that'll make it less critical on this one. But usually you're trying to get it so it's pretty close to exactly the size, or slightly too small, so you have to actually file or work a little to get it on there, so that you have a nice tight seam all the way around it. That's pretty close. I'm going to mark it right where they meet. And I'm still going to file it, so it's actually going to come out a little bit too small probably, which is fine. I want it to where I have to file the inside a little bit to get it tight up against there. As always, you want those guys kind of pushing together a little bit. And like I said, there's some solder on there already from yesterday. is something I made a while back, just because every once in a while there's a time when you need a round surface to hammer something on. It's kind of between mandrel sizes, so this comes in handy for that situation. I could make these and put them on the merch store if anybody's interested. Leave a comment if you think that's something that people would be interested in. Now, since we want this to solder nicely to the sheet that we're going to put underneath the bezel, as well as to the side of the bezel, we want to make sure it's flat, so that when we put it on the sheet, that solder can wick all the way along the whole seam and make a nice clean seam where you won't even be able to see it. That's pretty flat. I got it pretty snug, so I might just take my file . One of the reasons I like it so tight when you're doing a border around it is because when that solder flows around the seam that's in between these two pieces of metal, if it's really close together like this, it'll just run the whole seam smoothly and leave a nice clean seam. If you don't have it tight, there'll be areas where it's closer than other parts and farther apart in different spots, and so it won't run that whole seam symmetrically, and have gaps and things like that, and then it looks pretty amateurish, and nobody wants their stuff to look amateurish. Okay, that's pretty good. Just take it right off the big corner here. So I'm going to leave myself just a little bit extra on each side. Everybody asks about these shears. They're just little Fisker's craft shears. You can find them at just about any hobby store. Nothing too special about them, but they do work reasonably well for silver sheet. We want a nice clean seam all the way around, so I'm going to put some solder on the inside as well as lean some on the outside, and hopefully we can get it all in one go. up with some solder here. So right now some of these aren't touching where they need to be touching. However, I push them up while I'm heating it a little bit. The flux gets kind of gooey again. And sometimes you can kind of use it to stick things where you want them to be. Okay. So let's get this thing warmed up. I might do a little heating from underneath on this one because it's such a big bezel. Like I said, I'm just tilting it up a little bit until that solder starts to flow. Kind of gives you a little heating advantage to get things going. When you first start soldering something like this, the bezel is kind of exposed and up on the top and easy to melt. But we can prevent any of that kind of stuff happening. A lot of people use a tripod to get underneath stuff for heat. That's a good idea. I don't use one, but some people do. I'm going to add a little bit of solder to the outside just to make sure I get a good seam all the way around. That's what I'm doing, is I'm pushing down a little bit on the square wire when the solder is liquid to make sure that we have flow all the way around. Now, for my next step, I'm just going to trim off the excess sheet here. So, take this and file this solder flush, and you can't even see the seam. Okay. So I'm going to leave that in the pickle for a little while we cut those tubes that we're going to use for the bail that goes underneath it. But you can see that's a nice clean seam. So we're going to get it a little cleaned up and cut some tubes. Welcome to my very clean, very organized soldering or sawing area. Not so much. Okay, so I split this into little, like 6 or actually I did about 7 millimeters for each of these. Are pretty close. That'll give me a little room to file and clean. I put a 0 blade on here, so we'll see how it does. There's my tubes. I neatened them up with the file, so they're all pretty close to the same width. I'm going to, with the Dremel, clean up the top of this border here, because once I solder these things on, it's going to be a little harder to get in there to clean that up. And so I'm going to try and get it as scratch-free as possible. Even if it's not shiny, it'll be scratch-free. So be right back. That up on the top a little bit so it'll be easier to polish in there. I'm going to put, I marked where the solder joint was on the outer part, the outer rim there, because that's the messiest spot. And so I'm going to, so when I have the stone in here like this, that's going to be where that stem goes, about there. Yeah, there. My idea was that it would come out of this spot there. Where one of these tubes is going to be attached. Now I'm marking where the tubes are going to be soldered on. So. Looks like someone who's got curlers in their hair. Okay. Now let's make a flower. Sort of a lotus blossom looking thing here. Maybe. It's easier to see scratch lines if you make a color them with kind of Sharpie or something. So, kind of got a marquee shape for that middle one. Each of these, we'll just do kind of similar leaves and then I'll snip them off to match the curve. I'm also going to try and cut these a little bit so they have a little bit of three-dimensionality to them. See how that works. So, find that grabbing block. I'm going to try and solder it so it kind of overlaps like that a little bit. That's pretty good. If I can get it to do that, that's not bad. I think once that's up there, that'll be pretty. So let's mark off the area we need to remove. My little flower. Yeah, solder in. More minutes. Okay. There's not any major flaws or anything. It's probably done. So let's see. I may add some more leaves to that flower. I'm not sure. Let's see. Let's let it pickle for a while. I decided that I wanted to add some little stamens or pistils or whatever that center part of the flower is called. I cut out a little disc with my disc cutter, and I'm going to use that as the center point. So I kind of cut that in half. Ish. Ow. Pinched myself. And then to make the little pistils, stamens, I think they're pistils, and there's like one stamen. So this is some 22 gauge sterling wire, and I'm just going to ball up the end on this, both of these, and we'll cut them really short. I can kind of dribble a little flux on here. Got this little guy over here. Soldered down. I'm going to pick a little solder on the back of this, and I may do a tiny bit in the middle of this petal here. Okay, most of the mass in this soldering operation is over here, so I'm going to kind of avoid those little stamens, pistils, or whatever they're called, until the very end there. I'm going to try and add just a tiny bit of solder. Take a little peek at how well that's on there. I think it's on there pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and pickle this, and then we'll clean it up and polish it and set the stone. I have some tag board in here. I'm going to go ahead and start setting this. I put just a dab of epoxy in there because I don't want this pattern of the stone rotating at all. So I'm going to go ahead and get this set, burnish it, and make sure I didn't get any epoxy anywhere I didn't want it. And And I will do some final cleanup on it and get some good pictures. All right, let me go get that cleaned up the rest of the way, and I'll put some pictures at the end of the video. All right, well, I'm not sure what we're going to call this one yet, but I sure enjoyed making it, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as well. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave, and also check out some of my other videos. I have lots of content here. I'm over 150 videos now, some of which is targeted towards beginners, some towards more experienced people who just want some ideas or some new techniques. So check them out, subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit the links in the video description down below. So thanks for watching. Happy silversmithing. Take care.